An area of a triangle question. Now we learn half base times height quite early on in our lives, but relatively speaking. But so you could be thinking, oh yeah, it's going to be that. But of course, we don't have a height in this situation. We're simply given the three sides, so that's out the window. We have to resort instead. I mean, we could, in theory, work out the heights, but I think that's going to be complicated. A simpler way is to use the formula half AB sine C. Because what jumps out there is you just need two sides and the angle in between it. Now we don't have the angle in between it, but we're going to need to find that. So let's go with this as the angle that we want to find. You could actually pick any of them, it doesn't matter. I'm going to call this one capital C. And then I'm going to call this little a and little b. Now, something else we have is, so we know how, you need to think in this question like it's not a right angle triangle, so you can't use trigonometry. So that only really leaves you with this formula that for calculating the area, but also the sine and the cosine rule. Well, the sine rule doesn't work unless you've got an angle already, so that's out the window. So we're going to need to use the cosine rule. I'm just sort of talking about what might be going through your head when you see a question like this. The cosine rule says that a squared equals b squared plus c squared minus 2bc cos a. Now actually I've already labelled the triangle ready for this one, and I'd now have to relabel it because I don't want what capital A is. But that's only one way of writing the cosine rule. You can switch it around. I can write that c squared is a squared plus b squared minus 2ab cos c. There's nothing special about labeling these angles. Normally I use this one, but because I've labeled my triangle like that, I'm going to use this one here. You might have labeled your triangle slightly differently. You're still going to be using the same formula essentially. All right, so we're in a good place now because we know what A, B, C are, and we can work out what capital C is. You could rearrange this equation first and make cos C the subject, and you should be able to do that if you want to tackle the latest questions on GCSE papers, and it's an essential skill for A level. I think here I'll stick with just substituting the numbers in and dealing with it from there, though, because that makes it a little bit easier to understand, I think. So 6.4 squared equals 5.8 squared plus 3.9 squared minus 2 times 5.8 times 3.9 cos capital C. I can now work out what some of these are. So I can do some rearranging while I'm at it. I can do 6.4 squared, and then I'm going to minus the 5.8 squared. And I'm going to minus the 3.9 squared. So I've got minus 7.89. I've done a few steps in one go, but that's okay. Equals minus 2 times 5.8. I'm not going to work this one out. I could do. And then cos C will equal minus 7.89 divided by all of this lot. I can actually ignore the negative because it's a double negative, so 7.89 divided by, and I could have worked this out first, what 2 times 5.8 times 3.9 is. Okay, but that gives me 0.1744. I'm not actually going to use that, but I'm just showing my working as I go along. So that means that capital C is inverse cos of 0.1744. Okay, because if I've got cos of it, I just have to do the opposite of cos. That's what inverse cos is. On the calculator, I can do shift cos and then the answer, because then I've got it as accurately as possible. I've not done any rounding so far. 79.956. Okay, and we are ready to deal with the area now. The area is going to equal a half times 5.8 times 3.9, because these are the sides I have, and then I want to times by sine of the angle in between. So sine of 79.956. Again, I can do all of this exactly on my calculator. I can do the sine first, so actually no, let's stick with it, what I've done here. So I could write 0.5 or a half times 5.8 times 3.9 times sine of the answer, because it's still stored in the memory, 11.1366. And you typically would round this to 2 or 3 significant figures, because the numbers have been given to 2 significant figures. So I'll write it to 3. I always like to, might as well write an extra one. You don't need to say that you're rounding it to 2 significant figures, and in fact I've got the answer in full, so I'd be okay with that. But that's this question, so you have to do 2 steps. You have to realise that you need to use the cosine rule to get the angle, and then use this half AB sine C. There will be other ways to do it, but this actually feels the simplest.